Welcome to the Mystery School channel. This is your brother disciple, Vito Corleone. In today's video, we have lesson number 2 for the course in the Hermetic Science of Personal Magnetism, so we can discuss the basics of internal energy cultivation. These lessons are designed to help everyone regardless of which path they have chosen, so whether your goal is spiritual development, material development, or both, these instructions will help you on your path. In the second lesson, we will discuss the absolutely essential charging process in the use of personal magnetism. This charging process is usually labeled laying the foundation, so we will discuss how to properly lay the foundation for using personal energy. Please take note that I will use the synonyms for the auric energy that I listed here on screen interchangeably throughout the video. For example, chi, ki, mana, and prana. I will explain any contextual difference in these terms when necessary because they do not mean the same thing. They are just synonyms, which mean that they are similar, not the same. I recommend the aspirant learn the contextual differences between these words to further their studies in the field of personal magnetism. In the first lesson on personal magnetism, I provided a definition of magic that included the charging process as a part of the use of personal energy. So in this lesson, we must first define what it means to charge something or someone. Charging is defined as accumulating and storing electromagnetic energy called the aura. Simply put, the aspirant must consider themselves to be equivalent to a human battery. Most books in the West do not fully disclose this topic and will only talk about it sparingly because charging is the most essential thing when it comes to magic. As I'm sure we can all understand the concept of the importance of how the amount of energy or magnetic power we have will necessarily make or break the effectiveness of a spell or other use of our personal magnetism. The charging process is called laying the foundation because if you build any kind of structure, you have to lay the proper foundation or the entire project will collapse. The most important principle when laying the foundation is to learn how to emulate nature. When we observe the cosmos, we immediately notice the balance, order, and harmony implicit in the universe. Each and every one of us must learn to imitate this balance and harmony as best as we can. This rule is expressed in the complete Hermetic axiom as above, so below, as internal, so external. Most people know the partial Hermetic axiom as above, so below, and a few people have heard of the complete Hermetic axiom as above, so below, as within, so without. But I changed it as above, so below, as internal, so external because it sounds better in English due to the fact that in my experience, people would get confused when I said as within, so without, because they would respond, without what? But the Hermetic axiom as above, so below, as internal, so external simply states that everything is similar in nature. What happens in someone's external environment corresponds to what happens in their internal reality, and vice versa, as well as what happens above also happens below. This is the complete understanding of the Hermetic axiom. This Hermetic axiom is called similitude in Platonism, and it's called fractals in modern physics. We need to be very clear here that similar is not the same. So when I said treat yourself as a human battery, you are similar but not the same as the physical battery, and we should learn from the aspects that are similar, and we cannot learn from the aspects that are different. As long as a person is alive, their body is a reactor that is constantly producing this electromagnetic energy. Consequently, this electromagnetic energy never needs to be activated because it's always a part of our life. Understanding how to use our energy is the purpose of these lessons in the Hermetic Science of Personal Magnetism. Accordingly, throughout Lesson 2, we will talk about the different energy sources we can use to charge our human battery. The next important principle is to recognize that the charging process is entirely occult, with the word occult defined as hidden or invisible. So in this context, it means that you won't notice when someone else is using these charging methods. The only exception to this rule is if someone can proficiently feel energy. It is an absolute requirement for building the foundation that an individual be able to feel their own energy, as well as the energy of other people, plants, animals, and things like crystals. As how could anyone use their personal energy if they can't even feel it? To be able to control all of the different aspects we discussed in Lesson 1 regarding polarity, using matter as a cosmic instrument, charging and discharging, sympathetic vibrational transmissions, as well as cymatic tones, the aspirant must be able to feel energy, and this is referred to as the initiation process. Laying the foundation is the same thing as metaphysical initiation. There are many requirements to lay the foundation for metaphysical initiation, and redirecting your energy is the primary task. The quotes on screen perfectly summarize what it means for the aspirant to pursue energy cultivation for initiation into the mysteries. The Egyptian ka used in this quote here is dual in that it represents both the bodily appetites, called the shadow, as well as the chi, ki, mana, prana, auric energy force. To explain what Oliver St. John is saying in his book quoted here is that normally the body's appetites absorb all of our vital energy, but when we start to pursue metaphysical initiation, we start to redirect our vital energy for metaphysical purposes. Redirecting the vital energy is how to properly charge the four bodies: physical, etheric, astral, spiritual. And if this process is not done correctly, the foundation has not been brought to fruition, because all the uses of personal magnetism require the ability to redirect our energy from the normal use of feeding the bodily appetites to use for our practice with that energy. Each teacher has their own perspective on how long the aspirant needs to work on their foundation before they can begin their magical or alchemical operations. Oliver St. John says that building the foundation takes 1 year in his books, while Taoist internal alchemists such as Damo Mitchell talk about the 90 to 100 day purity training. Closer to the end of the video, we will explore this topic more in depth once we have gone through all of the different aspects of laying the foundation. Due to the fact that most books in the West do not present a clear understanding of internal energy cultivation, I will turn to some Eastern teachings that do present a clear understanding of the philosophy underlying the practice. The main tradition I will be using as the source for our lesson is Taoism, but as we saw in the second half of Lesson 1, every culture has had the concept of energy cultivation as a perennial philosophy, but unfortunately throughout time it was murdered out of existence in the West. And you'll notice the elites are still trying to murder these teachings out of existence with what we're seeing as the Chinese Communist Party specifically persecutes groups like the Falun Gong. I got all of this information from studying Chinese Qigong, and it should be noted that the Falun Gong are just another Qigong sect. So, very unfortunately, the persecution of these ideas continues to this day. To lay the foundation for magical and alchemical operations or simple personal energy cultivation for normal life uses of personal magnetism, the aspirant needs sufficient energetic ingredients, and those ingredients are termed Jing, Qi, and Shen in Taoist, Qigong, and Neigong. I will only use these technical terms sparingly, and instead I will use the English terms mind, body, spirit discipline. The first thing to consider from the ingredients Jing, Qi, Shen is Jing, and as we can see from the standard definition, as well as the picture on the bottom right hand of the screen, Jing is usually translated as sexual energy and sexual fluids. However, Jing necessarily means everything that has to do with the physical body, so when we talk about cultivating Jing, we are talking about conserving our sexual energy, such as choosing to be abstinent or celibate, and we are also talking about cultivating our Jing through our diet as well as through physical exercise. The second energetic ingredient is Qi, and Qi is almost always translated as breath energy, but I will be using the word spirit as the word spirit was used historically in the New Testament. In the book A Brief History of Qi, the author talks about 23 separate definitions of the word, and this doesn't just apply to Qi, but to Jing and Shen as well, so make sure to recognize that these are introductory concepts and we're going to build off of them. If you read the works of Thomas Cleary, he translates Qi to be energy as we can see from the book on the left side of the screen, but I chose to translate the word Qi as spirit because it is closer to the more historically accurate terminology. I chose the English word spirit because it is the closest thing to the Latin word spiritus, and the Latin word spiritus was chosen for the word that was originally pneuma in the Greek New Testament. Every time someone reads the New Testament and they hear the words Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost, in Greek it would read pneuma. Pneuma means the breath, life force, energy. That is the same thing that we are talking about in terms of Qi and Qi. This is where we get the English words like pneumonia. It's from the Greek word pneuma. This is why I chose to translate chi as spirit, because when we say breath energy in English, we do not fundamentally have the same concept that they are talking about in these other cultures and languages. In these other cultures and languages, the concept for the electromagnetic energy must necessarily include the concept of God. All of these similar esoteric words signify that we are breathing in God, so we can't just understand it as simple oxygen. We must fundamentally recognize this breath energy is the same as the psychic energy of God. If you are in any way confused about what I mean by the term God, I mean the vitalizing intelligence that sustains, energizes, and powers the entire universe with its consciousness. Or just check out my video Proof of God number 2, Argument from Contingent Similitude, for an in-depth discussion on that topic. God also has to do with the translation of the word Shen. Shen is the third energetic ingredient. The word Shen also implies something spiritual, which is why the word was translated as spirit by Thomas Cleary, but Shen fundamentally means cultivating pure consciousness, which is done in spiritual states called grace, samadhi, or zen that we will explain later in the video. These spiritual states of consciousness are fundamentally about a divine mind, and the Greek word for divine mind in the Hermetica is nous, so that's what I chose to put here as the translation for Shen as well. Please take special note of these diagrams as they expertly depict the interplay of the polar electromagnetic currents as well as the three energetic ingredients Jing, Qi, Shen, mind, body, and spirit that make up all levels of manifestation in our universe. If you want to understand how to work with your energy, you must necessarily have an in-depth understanding of these pictures, so make sure to pause the video and study these diagrams every time you watch this video. The picture on the far left shows the wavelength of the positive and negative electric and magnetic yin and yang. The picture in the middle shows how we can refine our vibrational frequencies as we cultivate our mind, body, spirit, Jing, Qi, Shen. The picture on the bottom right shows all of the different aspects of the yin and yang energetic interplay of polarity both in the external universe and in the internal human organism. While the picture on the top right shows the direction that these polar energies flow through our aura. Let's move on to the body part of the mind-body-spirit discipline so that the aspirant can understand how to incorporate their Jing into the practice of energy cultivation. Usually the foundation of the mind-body-spirit discipline is always considered the physical body. We will go through each one of these different aspects of cultivating the vital energy sources of mind, body, and spirit, but the expectation is the individual will cultivate all three of these energy sources at the same time. Also, I'd like to make it abundantly clear that every practice done with intentional energy cultivation is completely different from any practices done without intentional internal energy cultivation. For example, you will notice that all of these activities on screen are things that cultivate someone's body, and people already do these activities, but they don't necessarily do these activities while combining it with the internal part of the training. The external cultivation of the physical body is called Weigong in Chinese and is absolutely necessary for the foundation. Obviously, external cultivation is going to be different than internal cultivation, so we want to harmonize and balance both internal and external cultivation with our mind-body-spirit discipline. It's your choice what kind of practice you maintain, but to properly cultivate the physical body, the initiate must consider the health aspects of their diet, they must consider working out their physical body, and they must cultivate their internal sexual energy through periods of abstinence or celibacy while training. Now I will ask you some sample questions to illustrate my points. First question, who has more energy, the person who can run a mile or the person who gets tired after walking? Second question, who has more energy, the person who can work out for an hour or the person who can only work out for 15 minutes before getting tired? Last question, who can work out longer, someone who has thoroughly analyzed their diet for the health benefits like all personal trainers recommend, or someone who just eats whatever they want, such as fast food like McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Jack in the Box, etc.? Obviously, the answer to all three questions is the person who can work out longer, who has a better diet, will have more energy and thus better personal magnetism. So if our goal here is more energy, then someone who is more physically fit necessarily has more energy. Therefore, if you want personal energy, consider incorporating your body into your practice. This bodily cultivation has to do with every aspect of the aspirant's life. Everything from the initiate's mental health to their education determine their cultivation abilities, so we will discuss more aspects later in the video. Right now, let's be abundantly clear that energy cultivation cannot be done without the aspirant conserving their sexual energy. As we can see from the quote on screen, your body goes through a tremendous physiological process to produce these sexual fluids. For those people who are observant, it is quite noticeable that people get very tired after any kind of sexual act by oneself or with partners. Those people who do not conserve their sexual energy have lost some of their vital energy, and their body immediately starts to produce more, which is a very tiring and draining process. Fundamentally, this is a major principle the aspirant needs to recognize if they want to pursue internal energy cultivation. Ultimately, it's up to you what you do with your vital energy. I'm just here to teach people about energy so that they can have more knowledgeable energy management. But make no mistake, sexual energy is called one of the three jewels for a reason. It's because your sexual energy is a treasure of gold and jewels. This sexual energy is required for all initiates, and anyone who disregards this part of the lesson will necessarily have less energy than those who take heed. The reason this sexual energy is so important is due to the fact that it is the foundational energy for the physical body and bodily practices. All of these disciplines on screen are also important when considering how to use your body as a cosmic instrument, which is what we discussed in Lesson 1. Since your body is the circuitry that conducts the electromagnetic energy, then physical postures with your body and hands will necessarily change the flow of this electromagnetic energy, which is why people use mudras as well as stretches and poses. I listed some examples on screen of disciplines that you could potentially choose from to incorporate into your daily practice. Most people have a light body practice with their stretches and poses, such as with Hatha Yoga, and some people have a very intense body discipline, such as those people who pursue martial arts. I will continuously emphasize the importance of cultivating your body during energy cultivation because it is the foundation of your mind-body-spirit discipline. People who are more physically fit can do pranayama longer, and those people who cultivate their sexual energy have better focus and more energy. If the aspirant is concerned with more energy because that means more powerful personal magnetism, then the aspirant must pursue a holistic mind-body-spirit discipline. When approaching energy cultivation, it is absolutely essential to note the major philosophical differences between Eastern holistic mind-body-spirit disciplines and Western dualism. Mind-body-spirit disciplines are contrary to the dualist ideology in the West that comes from Plotinus's Neoplatonism and René Descartes, who advocated a dualist philosophy that perceives the soul as different from the body. There are, of course, non-dualist philosophies in the West, but the most popular ideology is body-spirit dualism. Most people have heard of the ghost in the machine philosophical quandary about whether or not humans have a soul. In that quandary, the perspective this analogy takes is necessarily looking at the body as not being the same as the consciousness inside the body because a ghost is completely different than a machine. There is a metaphysical saying that is the same thing as the ghost in the machine analogy. If you ever hear someone say that the body is the altar for the spirit, that is the same thing as saying the ghost in the machine. This metaphysical analogy is saying that the spirit is different from its altar, but dualism is contrary to the mind-body-spirit philosophy that the mystery schools teach. The Eastern ideologies like Taoism and Kundalini Yoga include the body in their practice as they recognize that the body is only an extension of our consciousness. Therefore, if the aspirant cultivates their body, they will cultivate the spiritual being that operates through the body. This philosophy must be recognized in the initiate's approach to the field of medicine, as Eastern medicine thinks about an illness from a holistic perspective that your mind, body, and spirit are a part of a symbiotic relationship that is interconnected, as we can see from the pictures on screen. These pictures graph how a mental illness will affect the body and a bodily illness will affect the mental states, as well as vice versa. Good mental health will affect your body, and good bodily health will affect mental health. This is opposed to the Western dualist medicine, where if you see a psychologist, that psychologist more than likely will not help the patient with physical health, only mental health, even though they are intrinsically connected to each other and one necessarily affects the other. The same axiom applies for the average doctor who, if the person has an illness, the doctor doesn't talk about the potential psychological reasons for that sickness. If you are interested in this fundamentally different approach to medicine, please check out the book on the top right side of the screen written by a very well-researched doctor who is trying to pioneer this holistic mind-body-spirit movement in the medical industry. Understanding the connection between the mind, body, and spirit is required for energy cultivation, especially when it comes to the blockages in the initiate's bodily circuitry. This is because any kind of psychological or physical blockage will necessarily be an impediment in the energy cultivation process and subsequent discharge process. Purity is required for the aspirant to use their mind, body, and spirit as an energy source because any blockages will cause a problem in the discharge process. Therefore, it is vital to understand that energy cultivation comes from the moral realist philosophy, most often called moral objectivism. There are objective energetic consequences to people's actions, and if they act unethically, it will impede their energy cultivation practices and discharge practice by creating blockages when they are trying to channel the flow of the chi, ki, mana, prana, auric energy to power their personal magnetism. I will be making an entire video dedicated to this topic in this Hermetic Science of Personal Magnetism lesson series because people should know the truth about how unethical behavior objectively creates energetic blockages in the bodily circuitry. I already produced a three-part series critiquing the philosophical arguments of moral objectivism versus moral subjectivism, but those videos don't have any explanations of metaphysical laws of energy as it relates to the consequences of unethical behavior. But still check out those videos if you want to know about the only legitimate argument for moral objectivism that can possibly be made. These diagrams on screen are absolutely amazing and should be studied until fully understood because they help us comprehend many aspects discussed in Lesson 2, especially the next topic. Energy cultivation fundamentally revolves around minimizing leakage, or sometimes called drainage. If the aspirant does not manage their leakage as depicted by the graph on screen, then they cannot cultivate energy because that energy will just be drained by the body's appetites. Redirecting our vital energy is a requirement for metaphysical initiation because it stops leakage. There are many definitions of leakage, but to give you the most succinct definition, I quoted from Ava Wong's translation of Cultivating Stillness. You can pause the video and read the quotes on screen, but to summarize what they state that any action in which energy leaves the body is a type of leakage. These Taoist sages have listed the main ways energy drains, such as seeing, hearing, the unregulated emotions, and unbalanced behavior. The way people stop leakage is through right meditation. Right meditation includes eyes closed, a quiet place to meditate, and a few other things I will mention in my future videos on full yogic breathing. From this quote on the left side of the screen, you can see examples of the mind-body-spirit discipline because they are relating the psychological phenomena of the emotions to the corresponding physical organs of our body. Consequently, it is absolutely required for all initiates to factor into their energy management how they will control their leakage so they're not drained of energy when it comes down to using their personal magnetism. To help you do that, I included this chart here on the right to show people how energy cultivators recognize many aspects of draining behavior and the practices of energy cultivation to the opposite of the draining behavior to cultivate our energy. Since we are charging up our body as a part of the human battery analogy, it is absolutely essential to understand leakage or the energy cultivation process is useless. To mention a few examples of leakage, false light from TVs and phones, etc. is absolutely terrible, and I know I'm saying this to you while looking at a screen, but I do my best to put down my devices and pursue a life not attached to screens. Also, I mentioned in Lesson 1 that alchemy is usually considered the charging process and magic is usually considered the discharge process. Since I defined magic as the discharge process, it necessarily means that almost all magic is a type of leakage. The magical practices that have almost zero leakage is the practices of pure visualizations on the divine. Regardless of that general exception, the logical conclusion is that no matter what, we all have leakage to some degree. But as you will no doubt eventually come to understand, this holistic mind-body-spirit philosophy is directly contrary to the Western material culture that advocates people leak out their vital energy through constantly feeding a pleasure addiction. We will discuss the energetic exchange with your environment later in the video because the environment will always impact the individual's personal energy. But no matter what, the aspirant must manage their personal energy and their leakage with their own willpower and discipline if they want to properly lay the foundation for magical and alchemical operations as well as general use of personal magnetism. Laying the foundation with internal energy cultivation practices can also be seen as analogous to business management because businesses must manage their profits and losses with the goal to minimize losses. The same business principles apply to personal magnetism with the goal to minimize leakage.